listening to the Absolute Arsenal podcast. My name is PJ Davidson, and I am your host. You can follow me on both Twitter and Instagram at AbsoluteAFC. Again, that is AbsoluteAFC on Twitter and Instagram. We technically have a Facebook page, but I am guessing most people here don't really care about Facebook, but it's there. So you can check us out there if you'd like. It is Wednesday, February 8th, 2023. We are recording at about 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon here in New York City, so almost 8:30 in London. What a weekend. It was a weird one. To have the early game on Saturday, as most of us know, means that whatever Arsenal did in the match away at Goodison Park was going to largely decide the mood for the weekend. That pretty much held true. It was a weird one, and that's really what we'll dive into for the majority of that. We'll look forward to the match against Brentford this coming Saturday, and also, of course, how can we not cover the scandal with Manchester City? I know you were all shocked, at least as shocked as I was, just jaw on the floor that there was some sort of financial doping going on at Manchester City. Just never would have guessed it, but anyways. So Saturday against Everton didn't go great. Wasn't fun. Didn't enjoy it. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. But we came out with a lineup to start that I think most of us felt pretty good about. I mean, that's the full strength lineup. Obviously taking the Gabriel Jesus injury into account, but the big boost was Thomas Partey was fit and able to start after the scare with his ribs. Bummer that Smith Rowe wasn't able to make the bench. Obviously, Mohamed El-Neni is clearly out for a extended period of time. Reece Nelson, while he's back in training, not ready to make the bench. You would assume that he's going to get some minutes with the academy team before he gets a place on the bench for the senior team, or at least gets on the pitch. Arteta did include Mario Cozier-Dewberry, who is doing really well at youth level, but I think we all know at this point, when Arteta puts a youth player on the bench, the odds of him actually putting said player on the pitch are slim to none. He'd rather stick with what he has on the pitch, or put some square pegs in round holes before he does that. So just a warm body, nothing much else, or more or less, whatever you want to call it. But it was pretty clear that this had the makings of a problematic match. Goodison Park is a place where we've traditionally struggled over the years. Obviously, Everton has been a better team over the years than they seem to be now, although it doesn't seem that it's a lack of talent. They're clearly a talented bunch. Had a pretty shit manager, and I don't think that helped anything. And when you bring in a guy like Sean Dyche, given the craziness of Everton being in a relegation scrap, it's brilliant signing in terms of putting Sean Dyche at the helm. Everybody knows him from his Burnley days. We know what his brand of football is, how he sets up, and frankly, it's something that you can enact really, really quickly in terms of hard-nosed playing, defending really, really strongly with a low block, making it really hard for the other team to do anything. They give up a lot of possession, but all that matters at the end of the day is if they can score goals. And that's clearly something that Dyche did really, really well, keeping Burnley up year over year with his crazy, big, burly defenders. And, I'm not going to call it Stoke. I mean, they're not Tony Pulis bad, but not far off. Not a fan of Sean Dyche, but definitely exactly what Everton need to get over the line. I think if they have aspirations of being the club that they have been in the past, and they know that they could and should be, then Sean Dyche is not the long-term answer, but he's a great short-term answer. And if I were a betting man, and maybe I should be on this one, I would put a pretty good chunk of change that they will end up staying up, strictly for the fact that Sean Dyche is going to know how to get them over the line. But I digress. The match went on, and the match stats tell the tale that you would expect. I mean, we had 70% possession, 553 accurate passes to their 180. It was pretty blatant in terms of what we were doing versus what they were doing. But at the end of the day, all that matters was the goals, and that's what happened. We didn't look good. I think, again, away at Goodison Park against a Sean Dyche team, against a team on the new manager bounce, which it seems that Arsenal have a incredible history of going up against teams with new managers for the first time, and it's a real delightful experience, and that is completely sarcastic. It's pretty miserable. But despite the possession, I mean, we didn't do a whole lot. We had 15 total shots, but 0 big chances compared to their 12 shots and 4 big chances. I mean, if you're not going to create big chances, you're not going to win games. We had an XG of 0.91 to theirs at 1.67. Frankly, I'm surprised theirs wasn't higher than 1.67. They had a number of opportunities that I thought they should have done better with. I'm guessing a lot of that 0.91. I mean, we did sky a few shots. Saka had one on frame that Connor Cody was able to clear off the line, unfortunately for us. But you could tell we weren't at it. We weren't our normal selves. And that's going to happen over the course of a Premier League season. No matter how well we've been playing, there's just going to be matches where we're not at it. I think we've had matches this season where we haven't been at it, but we've been able to scrape out some points in some results along the way. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be this time, and they did really well on a set piece, and that's just what it came down to. Yeah, I mean, they had a corner, and William Saliba had done really well all day in terms of the style in which Arsenal defend the corners, a mix of zonal and man marking. Saliba had cleaned up pretty much all day. Unfortunately, he was blocked off, and that meant a one-on-one between the big oaf that is James Tarkowski against Martin Odegaard. I think there's not a whole lot Odegaard can do in that situation. It's a behemoth of a big guy defender, and Odegaard is pretty slight, and that's just not a winning battle, and those are situations we don't want to put ourselves in. Everton did a great job to get that matchup, isolate him, and Tarkowski delivered. Nothing Ramsdale could do. You would have hoped that Arsenal could have answered back at some point in some way, shape, or form, but it wasn't to be. I will be honest, I don't think Mikel Arteta covered himself in glory when it came to the subs. It was great to see Partey start. It was concerning when he came off. I don't know if that was a planned thing for him to come off after 60 minutes, especially the fact that we have 3 games in a 7-day period coming up with, of course, the gigantic 6-pointer against Manchester City, right smack dab in the middle of that. Him coming off was extremely surprising. I'm not surprised that Jorginho came on, not just because he's the new signing, he is the depth, but it was a game that called for his skill set in terms of somebody who could come in, try and regain a little bit of possession, control, calm things down. But, if we were going to make that sub, I think I would have looked more for him to come in for Xhaka than Partey, and the two of them could work together to put us back in control and get the ball back out to some of our more creative players, which leads me to another, what I thought was pretty weird sub, which was not so much Fabio Vieira coming on, but Martin Odegaard coming off. Say what you want about Martin Odegaard not quite being at it on the day, but he has that quality that I think we've had players over the years, and certainly guys now. I mean, a Mesut Ozil, a Alexis Sanchez. Let's take those two for example. Those two had some really bad, rough days where they just nothing was coming off. They were, in Alexis's case, losing the ball left and right. In Ozil's case, just lazy, whatever, disappearing against the big teams, away days, all the classic things. But the thing about players like those two and like Odegaard is that at any moment they can produce a moment of magic. They can be having the worst day ever, but they can produce that one moment. And when it comes to football matches, that's all it is. It's one moment. Look how we lost. It was one moment. It's one goal. In this case, I keep Martin Odegaard on the pitch because he can provide that. Nothing against Fabio Vieira. I would just, at that point, again, I probably would have taken Granit Xhaka off. He wasn't having a great day, and I'm absolutely on the Granit Xhaka comeback train. I mean, I was as done with him as about anybody. I've never been a fan of Granit Xhaka, but he's been phenomenal the past year plus. Today, he just wasn't at it, and I don't see him as that same moment of magic player to the level that a Martin Odegaard is. I think Fabio Vieira is very much like that. I've half-jokingly compared him to Lucas Perez in the sense that Lucas Perez was a player that he could basically have no impact, and again, he's playing mostly against lower-level opposition, Europa League group stages, things like that, but he always came away with goals and assists. I mean, at an incredibly impressive level. I mean, he was never going to be an Arsenal player. He wasn't a first choice, and we can go into that. But Fabio Vieira has been doing much of the same. He gets the opportunities, and he's pretty quiet by most standards, but then he produces these moments of magic. So I don't have an issue with Vieira coming on. I just didn't get Odegaard coming off. It was also super late, a lot of these subs. Tomiyasu for Ben White was absolutely the right one. Again, I don't know what is going on with Benjamin White. He doesn't look right. He hasn't looked right for a bit now, and I think it's probably time to take him out of the firing line a bit. Tomiyasu's been fantastic. He's done a really, really good job, and I think that he's shown that if we're going based on form, he deserves the starting spot right now at right back. What that means for the Manchester City match midweek next week, I don't quite know. But at the very least, and again, we'll get into Brentford later, I think it's pretty clear he should be starting at right back in that match. But we'll get into that later. I'd say the other big thing or player that you could look at was Martinelli. I mean, I know he's really dividing opinion, and similar to what I just said about Ben White, he hasn't quite looked himself. As many others have noted, it's pretty blatant that Gabriel Martinelli is suffering more than anybody at the loss of Gabriel Jesus to injury. Those two combined extremely well. And nothing against Eddie Nketiah. I mean, he's been fantastic. But that level of understanding and combination play between him and Martinelli is just not the same for whatever reason. Martinelli, though, very similar to what I said before. Let's compare him to Alexis Sanchez, both players who played off the left wing. Alexis had all the games where he gave the ball away 1,000 times and played selfishly and this and that, but he could provide that moment of magic. And there is something to be said about Gabriel Martinelli in the same way, but he hasn't looked quite right. Whether that's a fitness issue, if it's just form is going to dip. I mean, we forget how young of a player he is, and that's a big thing for young players. His form is going to fluctuate. I have to say, though, Trossard's looked really good whenever he's come into the match. Like, very, very good. He offers something a little bit different. There was a really interesting chart, and I asked about this on the Arscast Extra, and as soon as Andrew sent it over to James, I mean, he said, nope, not surprised at all about that. He was at the game, that Martinelli is just unbelievably isolated out on that left wing. I think that's intentional, but it makes for much harder work than the right side. We traditionally have been a team in recent years that works down the right. I think the fact that Bukayo Saka exists on the right is a huge part of that, but Martinelli out on the left is doing a really, really tough job in terms of being out there on his own from a defensive standpoint. He's got Alexander Zinchenko right behind him. We all know Alexander Zinchenko is not a traditional left back. The positions he takes up are not in traditional left back areas. So as a result, I mean, Martinelli's got to do a lot more defensive work getting up and down. It can't be where he pushes super, super high up because we're just going to be in trouble. And credit to Gabriel Magalhaes, who does an absolutely just invaluable job at that left center back role where he has to cover so much more ground than a traditional center back. And oftentimes Granit Xhaka does a great job there helping out as well. That's just part of the system. But again, he makes those runs forward too, darting into the box, something that 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago we never in a million years would have expected to see from Granit Xhaka. But I think Martinelli's got a much more difficult job, and it's not as straightforward a comparison because Trossard does take up those more central positions as well. And I think that affects the way that we play. He looked really good with Kieran Tierney. Martinelli did. So there's something to be said about that combination play between those two. Should Trossard get the start against Brentford? Maybe. Arsenal obviously has amazing technology and can tell if a player's in the red zone or if they are generally okay. If Martinelli is in that red zone, as they call it, of course, I think Trossard could come in, especially with the schedule coming up. But I would look to put him back in for City. I can't imagine a world where Leandro Trossard gets the start against Manchester City over Gabriel Martinelli. Form, whatever you want to call it, it does, in my opinion, that goes out the window for this one. But again, we'll get into Brentford in the upcoming schedule shortly. Another player who I think is a really interesting one to talk about is Jorginho. As we mentioned, when it came to the subs, he came on for Thomas Partey, which I get it. I think it's a great luxury to have another player who can calm things down, keep possession, keep control, keep the ball ticking. I'm actually way more in favor of this Jorginho signing than I think most are. At first I wasn't. I was horrified by it the first time I saw it, but I think it's a really smart, sensible signing. A player who can really, really help Arteta and the squad as a whole this year and next year. And the fact that we have the 1-year option after that, great. If he's still helpful, we'll keep him. If not, goodbye. Thanks for your service, but time to go. But he came in for a lot of hate on social media in regards to his performance. I think a lot of folks judged him before he even set on the pitch, and pretty much whatever he did, he was going to get hate because he's Jorginho, and he's been a key player for a key rival and has really done well against us in some big matches, and we don't forget. But with that said, I thought he did perfectly fine. Do I think he did amazing? No. But do I think anyone did amazing in that match? No, not really. He was fine. He wasn't the problem, that's for sure. He came in, he kept things ticking, that was that, but we just didn't create. It wasn't our day. It didn't happen. And I think these days happen, and you have to accept it. With that said, I mean, we get ruined. We're talking about the early kickoff on a Saturday, so now we have to sit there the whole weekend. You've got City the next day with a chance to cut the lead to 2 points, even though we do have a game in hand. But, I mean, that is scary. I mean, that's the whole thing is they're going to pressure us the second half of the season, and we're going to have to stand up to that. I mean, they're a really good team. They've been here before, and you look at their stats in the second half of the season, year over year over year. I mean, they stepped their game up. Pep is going to make sure that they do so, you would think. It was Spurs. I mean, obviously Spurs are going to completely bottle it because they're shit, and that's what they do. But then they didn't. I mean, it was crazy. I missed the very first part of the match, but I turned it on and saw that they were up 1-0 and disbelief. I mean, I really wasn't going to bother watching. I think one of the things is when Arsenal play early in the weekend, and if the result doesn't go our way, I don't know about all of you, but I don't really want to watch football the rest of the weekend. I'm just not. I want to separate. I want to forget. I want to wait for the podcast to come out. I'll relive it then we move on, and that's that. But as soon as I saw Spurs up 1-0, I was like, all right. I'm prepared to get hurt. We all know that Spurs are not going to hold on because they bottle it and they get beat everywhere they go. But, I mean, this was just not the Manchester City I'm used to. it wasn't good. And I mean, I don't think Spurs were fantastic by any means, but this was not the City that I expected. So for once, thank you, Spurs. Words I never thought I'd say, and I don't know that I'll ever say again, but cheers, guys. I mean, that was great. The one battle that was so much fun to watch, at least for me, I think most people, the Emerson Royale versus Jack Grealish battle. With that said, Spurs were kicking the absolute living shit out of Jack Grealish, left and right, and I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it, because I did. And Emerson Royale, I mean, that was a big name transfer. We were in for him, as a lot of people know, and when it came to that window, I mean, we wanted another right back. Clearly, Hector Bellerin was not the future, and Ainsley Maitland-Niles wanted to play central midfield, and clearly still does, and that's working out really, really well for him, as we all know. But it was really a whole thing of Emerson Royale was the prime thing, and then there was this unknown Takahiro Tomiyasu, Japanese international, playing in England. But, I mean, Emerson Royale is Barcelona. You go after that guy. I mean, that's the big name, and he's young, he's Brazilian. I mean, I assumed, as most people did, that was the prime target. Spurs ended up getting him. We ended up getting Tomiyasu, and I think it's pretty darn clear who's gotten the better end of that. I mean, Royale's been pretty awful for the most part, and that might be generous, whereas, I mean, Tomiyasu has been fantastic when healthy. Majority healthy player, not the last year, but when he plays, I mean, he is amazing. When he's healthy and fit and doing his thing, I think he can play right back for 99% of teams in the world. There's a lot of big teams out there, Champions League clubs, who would kill for a Takahiro Tomiyasu at right back. Of course, he can play center back as well, but he's been really, really, really good. And of course, the one time that Emerson Royale shows up and plays his game, and he won that battle. I mean, say what you want about the kicking of Jack Grealish, as I said before, but he was really phenomenal, and credit to him. And the fact that he won that free kick at the end of the game, I think was kind of the icing on the cake of that battle between the two of them. Clearly not fans of each other. I don't think they'll ever be fans of each other, and that'll be a fun one to watch for the future. Although I would expect Jack Grealish to win that one pretty much 99 times out of 100. But fantastic that this was the 1 out of 100 that he didn't. And we got a get out of jail free card. I know a lot of people will naturally, and I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but it's a super glass half full negative approach of like, oh my God, missed opportunity. We should have won. We could have then gone 8 points clear with a game in hand. Bum, bum, bum. I don't know about you guys. I am so relieved that they didn't cut it to 2, and it's still 5 with a game in hand. Of course, it would have been great if we won and they lost. No shit. We all know that. With that said, the fact that they didn't take advantage, let's just be happy with that. I'm really happy with it. You should be happy with it. Let's all just be happy with it. So we go with one less game to play over the course of the season in the same gap. I'll take it. The week ahead, though, just looking at that, I mean, this is going to be tough. 3 games over the course of a week for Arsenal, and big ones. You've got Brentford, where I think you would expect a degree of rotation to be somewhat of a necessity, but we'll see. Then, of course, just 4 days later, you've got Arsenal Man City at the Emirates. It's going to be massive. In my opinion, a must-not-lose game if we want to win the title. Of course, I would love a win, at the very least. It's a must-not-lose. It's a 6-pointer. If you draw, fine. We call it even, and the most they can gain on us through those direct things is that 3-point, again, 6-pointer, but a lot better than them taking both. And then the following weekend will be another interesting one, where we get a rematch against Unai Emery at Villa Park. So it's a tough 7 days, tough 3 matches. I mean, Brentford, everybody remembers the start of the season, the COVID outbreak, Balogun having to play striker out of absolutely nowhere. Benjamin White, not the best debut after a 50 million quid transfer, and people do not forget. But But yeah, I mean, this is not going to be an easy week. With that said, when it comes to Brentford, I think this is the definition of a match where you have to rotate and you have to trust your squad. As I mentioned before, I think Tomiyasu has to take the right back spot over Benjamin White. I think that is one that then when it comes to the City match, that's going to be a really, really tough decision for Mikel Arteta if Tomiyasu plays another great match. White's been a huge part of our success this year. I think he's been arguably the best right back in the country, one of the best in the world. I mean, he has been absolutely phenomenal. Does a really great job when it comes to combining with Bukayo Saka. They seem to have a good understanding. Not so much lately, but before, I mean, fantastic. On the other side, it's tough to say with Zinchenko. Is there fitness to manage there? Is this a game for Kieran Tierney? Especially if this is a guy that you want to persuade to keep, you got to give him some bigger games. I also understand that Zinchenko is, I'd say outside of Thomas Partey, could be considered our most valuable player in terms of hard to replace within the squad. What he does, nobody else does. So another tough one. I mean, your center backs you keep the same. Your keeper you keep the same. Midfield I'm keeping the same. I really, really hope Thomas Partey is healthy. But I think you got to keep that the same. I don't know that you need to rotate. Xhaka plays every match. He pretty much has always played every match. You need Odegaard out there. I don't think Vieira is ready to just take that spot. Clearly, Emil Smith-Rowe is not fit and able to do that. Saka, automatic right wing. Nketiah, we don't have a frickin' choice, so he's playing striker. And then that brings us to the big decision to make on the left wing. Does Leandro Trossard come in for Gabriel Martinelli? I think it's a toss-up. I think, again, if it's a red zone thing, you got to get Martinelli out of there. Trossard is a fantastic addition to the squad and somebody who you can stick out there and I think trust. It's a genuine competition, just the same way that Benjamin White and Takehiro Tomiyasu are genuine competition at right back. If you're not going to produce, someone's going to take your place because that's a very, very good player behind you. So I understand that. I also understand wanting Martinelli to maybe find some form and work through it and find some confidence ahead of a massive match against Manchester City. And then from there, I guess you're going to have to evaluate again against Villa at Villa Park and Unai Emery, and that's going to be a big match, and Emery's clearly going to be up for it. I'm sure he's somewhat bitter about the way things went down with Arsenal, and I know he thinks that he should have gotten more time, and yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens. Lastly, we should jump into the big news, which is the Manchester City scandal. I guess we'll call it. Huge reports coming out that there's been a multi-year investigation into how they have been reporting finances, how they have been working with said investigators, or I should say not working with them, possibly obstructing their investigation as much as they could. Listen, like no one's sitting here saying that Manchester City is doing things the right way in a self-sustaining fashion. I mean, listen, there's so much money there. We all know it. I mean, they were really one of the first teams to come in and just transform when they signed Robinho on deadline day, hours after the takeover was complete, and he didn't understand why everything was blue because he thought he was signing for Manchester United. The money coming into the game is crazy. What it's doing to the game is crazy. What Todd Bowley is doing at Chelsea is crazy. What Newcastle are probably about to do now that they're owned by a nation state is going to be crazy. It's going to be a huge, huge problem. I think if you are the Premier League and the footballing world as a whole, if you want to keep any concept of fair play, LOL at financial fair play as if that's a real frickin' thing, but nonetheless, if you want to stop and deter teams from doing these sorts of things, you have to lay down a real punishment. You have to. And I'm not talking a fine. That's not a real punishment to these people, and you've got bottomless pits of cash. finding them cash doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything to them. Like, yeah, of course they don't want to get fined millions of pounds and whatnot, but do you really think fining a Manchester City or a Newcastle or a Todd Bowley's Chelsea, do you really think that does anything? No, it does absolutely nothing. It doesn't stop them from ever doing this again because, they're just going to fine us. Great, that's fine. No pun intended. You have to strip titles. You have to deduct points. You might have to relegate. I don't know exactly what the right answer is, but I know what the wrong answer is, and that's what's happened before, where these teams get little slaps on the wrist, nothing of significance happens, they end up, basically going to the court of arbitration for sport, getting things tossed, and we repeat the cycle. If that's the way this is going to go, we're all screwed, same way it has been. But I think if you want to make any impact, and I don't think it's going to make a Liverpool supporter feel any better, all those years that they were competing for titles in, a pretty impossible situation. And I'll be the first to say I have a lot of respect for the way that Liverpool conducts their business. I think Darwin Núñez was a step away from the norm for them, but they do things pretty much the right way from a financial perspective compared to these other clubs. It's not like we're competing against, Chelsea with Save the Bridge, and then they get Abramovich, and now they get Bowley, or Manchester City. Remember when they were a mid-table club with Alano in midfield and Joe up top? And it's just a totally different beast, all because of ownership. And of course, we're owned by some really rich people, and we spend a lot of money. But not like this. This is just different. Yeah. Let's hope there's an actual punishment. That's the only way you're going to deter anybody from doing this. I'm going to be a broken record. I will say, I do hope that whatever it is, however it goes down, I doubt anything happens before the end of the season, because we all know that there will be a very lengthy appeals process and courts and appeals of appeals of appeals and what have you. I just hope that nothing happens that tarnishes a potential Arsenal title win. I don't think there should be, but I do just want to make sure that we win. There's no asterisks. I've heard other people say, screw it, give them all the fines, give us all the asterisks in the world, as Andrew from the Arscast said. Of course, I want the title. I'll celebrate it just as hard if we win that way. I just don't want it tarnished by any stretch. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Let's see. I think the United match is going on right now without Casemiro because he loves sticking his arms around other people. That's totally fine, right? Let's see. Leeds are up at half. The new manager bounced. Oh my God. He scored again? That is one heck of a player they have at Leeds on the wing. Young Italian guy. What is it? Nonto? He's fun to watch. If you haven't watched this winger from Leeds, 19 Italian, he is absolutely electric. They're going to get some big money bids in the summer for this kid. He is fantastic. But yeah, very exciting to see that Leeds are hopefully going to get some new manager bounce. It's a little bit scary to say that United are still in the title race. They are. As of right now, if the result finished this way, they'd be 8 points back of us, and we'd have 2 games in hand. If they were to win, they'd be 5 games back of us with 2 games in hand. So they're within striking distance. So it's a little scary that they could do decent. I think, again, Ten Hag's done a really good job there. Rashford's in the form of his life, but Casemiro, what a freaking idiot. And then Arsenal women have a big match today. Unfortunate result against West Ham. Opportunity missed as they go to chase the title. I know they didn't get the striker that they wanted in the window. Looks like we're still 0-0 late on against Man City. So hopefully they can get something out of that match. Draw is a bit of a bummer. I saw a couple of the new players got starts today, so that's fantastic that they're heading in the right direction. A mixed bag from the academy. where Wilshire's 18s mounted a really nice comeback from 2-0 down to a 4-2 win. Unfortunately, the older guys had a pretty ugly result against PSV. Let's not talk about it. Funny enough, the Arsenal Academy account has been interesting on Instagram after some rough results, turning off comments, although they didn't turn them off for this one, which I was intrigued by. It is what it is. I don't know. But that's all we got. Thanks for hanging out with us for 35 plus minutes here. Hopefully it's a good weekend. Hopefully we can get off on the right foot against Brentford and really right the ship, build some momentum again before the gigantic showdown season-defining match against Manchester City, especially at home. We really need to take something from that match. Let's get back on track. Let's see some improved form from some of the guys who've been struggling. Let's get some performances from our squad players showing that they can contribute, because we're going to need every single member of this squad as we get down the stretch. Gabriel Jesus currently out there running again. I don't anticipate him being back anytime super soon, but that'll be a huge, huge, huge boost if we can get him back with enough time to make an impact. Eddie's done a really good job, though. Credit to him. It'll be a great problem to have when Flo Balogun comes back. That's going to be a lot of fun. So let's leave it there. Again, my name's PJ Davidson. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AbsoluteAFC. That's AbsoluteAFC. Here's to 3 points this weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.